Welcome to Future Economies Start With Youth, the podcast. My name is Kevin Isatepalm, and in today's episode, we will dive into one of the most important topics out there, young women's participation in the workforce, specifically in leadership positions. Despite the ample evidence that women in leadership are instrumental to business success, many companies seem unable or simply unwilling to promote women to leadership positions. And today's guest will help us understand why this is and how we can stimulate gender equality in leadership in companies. With me today are four incredible young women, I can say, who are going to shed light on this quite important topic. So first off, we have Felicity Sibindi, a senior program manager at VSO and also a member of the Action Circle for Fair Share of Women Leaders, who will zoom in on what feminist leadership actually is. We have Rosanna Duncan, a diversity and inclusion specialist who will share some tips for companies to improve their gender representation in leadership. And also we have Nabihah Rishad and Jennifer Ndegwa joining us digitally will reflect on their experiences of holding leadership positions in the cybersecurity sector within Kenya. So we have quite a nice crowd. I'm excited to start with this discussion. Thank you so much for joining me here today. Women's representation in leadership roles has dominated employment discussions for quite a while now. Yet, we still have a long way to go to achieving gender parity. A recent study demonstrated that only 31% of leadership positions are held by women, while women in almost every single country make up more than half of the workforce. Felicity, why do you think this disparity is so persistent?
Thank you, Kevin. That's a really important question. I think it's twofold. There's some structural issues, and then there's some psychosocial issues, which lead to the disparity with women climbing up the ladder in the corporate space. When we're looking at structural issues, systemized misogyny plays a big role. A lot of the people who are in leadership positions who choose, say, the executive boards of organizations, they tend to be cisgendered, white men. And this can create a barrier when it comes to their own biases in terms of who they hire or who they recruit. So people they want to hire people who look like them, who sound like them, who make decisions like them. So that structural barrier can actually create more a systemic gap or challenge that women face. Moving on towards the policy types of barriers. You have some inclusive or sometimes progressive policies. For example, you have the flexible working environments, which we really promote and we want women to take advantage of, especially with their role with childcare. However, this can sometimes make them invisible in the office. So not being visible, not being able to show up can be a way to screen women away from leadership potential, being seen as having that potential. So organizations really need to look at the way they identify leaders. Lastly, looking at the social factors, women sometimes can internalize misogyny. So women face more scrutiny in the work environment, their decisions are often questioned, and this can create a situation where they feel that they themselves can't fulfill leadership roles. So that those barriers can create a real stumbling block, particularly for young women.
Okay, but what about women's aspirations? How do you think especially young women's aspirations for leadership positions compared to their male peers? Do you see a gap here?
No, I don't think there are any major differences between men and women when it comes to their aspirations. I think if you want to create impact in the world, everyone wants that opportunity. Everyone wants an opportunity to lead change. So in terms of aspiration, I think there are no differences. However, the differences do arise when it comes to how women in leadership positions are treated. The scrutiny I mentioned earlier, the decision-making potential, the fact that they're second-guessed and questioned all the time, that can create a barrier for women even when they possess leadership qualities and they're put in leadership positions, which can really limit their scope of work. Sometimes what we find is that organizations need to take a more feminist leadership type of perspective in the way they do their work. Looking at things like leadership sharing, looking at the investment in building teams up in communication, in shared leadership, in creating environments which are safe so that marginalized communities, young women, are able to be seen and their work made visible so that they can also climb the corporate ladders. This is the work that we see organizations like Fair Share of Women Leaders doing. They're really trying to provide the tools for organizations and individuals to mainstream feminist leadership within their policies and within their structures. I'm very proud to say that as VSO Netherlands, we have 2 women co-directors who have just been appointed, and they're really mainstreaming these feminist approaches within the leadership structures.
Okay, that's really interesting. And Rosanna, I see you shaking your head, nodding your head. I mean,
Hi. Nodding, shaking. Thanks, and obviously, Felicity, that's really great insights into that. And I think in terms of what I can add to that sort of extending that conversation, I'd like to just sort of take a little step, I guess, before girls become women in the workforce. And I think it's really important that we not only take into account, obviously, these themes that Felicity is talking about there, but also consider the huge impact that education and early years have on girls, not only in terms of the sectors that they choose, maybe being protectively channeled by teachers and educators, careers advisors, even parents into sectors where maybe there is not so much upward mobility in those roles. But also, if we think about aspirations, I'm a big believer that aspirations are built way before the boardroom. And aspirations are often built when you're a young girl in school. And if you're lucky enough to go to a school where that's nurtured and developed, that's fantastic. But unfortunately, for some girls, in their experience, schools education can sort of act like a little bit of a dream stealer. And I think it's really important that we understand that role that education, educators, and everybody in that ecosystem plays in actually, the end result, which is what we're after, which is increased women in the workforce, increased women at leadership. We need to have I think, a heightened appreciation for their impact, and also, create an environment where, girls can dream big and their aspirations can be big, regardless of, what their background.
Indeed, Rosanna, I think you're raising such powerful points when it comes to how the systems we put in place can sometimes impede women. Often I'm also seeing this coming in when it comes to maternity leave. Organizations tend to be afraid to have women in leadership positions because they'll take some time off. This particularly affects young women. And I think that barrier needs to be removed. There are ways that we can make the environment in the workplace safer for women to take advantages of these opportunities that are presented. Things like paternity leave tend to even the playing field a little bit more, so that it is not only women who are seen in the caregiver role and being a cost in quotes to organizations, but where men can participate in caregiving for their children as well. So I really think having a structure, an environmental structure that promotes women leadership is important.
And look, Felicity, just playing back to one of the points there, I think it's really important that we all understand as well. If we make organizations and we make equity better for women, it makes it better for everybody, because a lot of the aspirations, as you say, we share are the same. And if we create stronger, more equitable, more diverse, inclusive organizations, that makes it better for everybody too.
yeah, exactly. And Nabihah, I also see you nodding your head quite positively.
Yes, I'd just like to add on to what Felicity and Rosanna have said. I really agree with their points. And something else we notice when women take up these leadership positions is the energy they bring into these board conversations, the thoughts they bring, and also the young girls looking up to them. They're able to see these women have a balance between their career and also take care of their families. And I think that's really inspirational as well.
Yes, exactly. The energy you bring. I think this podcast has quite a positive energy. I must say so myself. But since we have a young woman joining us today digitally, who has experienced firsthand how getting to a leadership position works in such a male-dominated industry, I want to hear more about you, Jennifer. As a cybersecurity analyst at Cybershuja, you are now leading an entire team. What was your experience like? How did the journey look like, and what barriers did you encounter on your path?
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you so much for having me. I think we can all agree that there are not enough women role models in tech or even in leadership. So, for example, in my school, I only had 2 lecturers. I did a computer science degree and only had 2 female lecturers. So, there was not many women to look up to, which causes you to wonder if, as a woman, you can actually excel in a tech world. So, yeah, I think some of the barriers, I believe there's a lot of discrimination. So even when we're presenting projects, you could tell that the supervisors and the lecturers were checking on the women and trying to question their excellence. So when you present a project that looks above par, the lecturers and supervisors would wonder if you actually did it yourself. So there was that. Luckily, after completing school and joining Cyber Shuja as a student, because I'm also a beneficiary of Cyber Shuja, I was able to encounter women mentors who have expressed genuine interest in supporting me and providing guidance in how to excel in tech and even in leadership. So I think my journey has been a bit different after completing my degree, more different than other Kenyan women, because I've had the rare chance of working alongside women leaders, Nabihah being one of them. And my supervisors who continuously pushed me into positions of leadership, allowed me to excel, affirmed me, and offered their mentorship and guidance in order to avoid common pitfalls. So I think having mentors in the space has enabled me to be able to perform my duties very well.
Okay, that's quite interesting. And you mentioned, two really interesting parts, the role models and also the aspect of representation. It's clear that women's representation in leadership positions just positively contributes to business success, and that's been proven time and time again. But despite the evidence, many organizations still, consider leadership diversity as a nice to have instead of a must have. So, Rosanna, I want to ask you directly now: how can organizations address the underrepresentation of women in senior leadership positions?
Thank you. And look, as you know, I work at Palladium, and a few years ago at Palladium, in our most senior executive roles, we didn't have any women within those roles. We now have just under about 40%. And for our senior manager roles and above, we have about, I think, 54% women represented at those levels. And we've come on quite a journey. And I think for me, there's been some really key actions that we've taken as an organization to be able to progress to that point. So I think, first of all, the advice I would give to organizations is that you've really got to give equity, diversity and inclusion. So you've got to give equity, diversity and inclusion a seat at the top table. And what I mean by that is you have to have a very senior person who has the CEO's mandate and the board's mandate to drive forward that change. It helps you get things done a lot quicker and people listen. It's really important that organizations don't just see equity, diversity, and inclusion, so EDI, as the responsibility or a HR function, because EDI permeates through everything an organization does. And if you want to improve representation of women at leadership, it's not just about your workforce, it's about how you present EDI in your work with communities, with your customers, and then also within your supply chain. It's really important to make sure that everybody understands that EDI is everybody's responsibility and that you hold leaders accountable. So at Palladium, one of the things we introduced was linking performance around EDI to senior leaders' pay. It's really important that we understand this is a continual process. Delivering on this is on EDI or increasing diversity or women in leadership is not a one and done. It's a continual process. So it's a conversation that has to keep going within organizations, and a continual review of things like talent acquisition processes and policies, and also HR policies, procedures, and culture will enable organizations to keep a finger on the pulse and to continually change, because the key topics and the challenges around diversity will change as time goes on. So it's important that we see this as something which is not one and done. And I guess one of the things for me, which is the most important issue, is a lot of organizations, when they talk about women in the workforce or women in leadership, they talk about women like they're a homogenous group. But the reality is that women are not one dimensional, and there are many different characteristics and backgrounds that people can have or women can have that will compound the inequality and discrimination that they will experience, or the treatment that they will experience. And, if in your workforce, the women are very, very similar to all the men that you have in terms of educational background, ethnicity, socioeconomic background, the list goes on, then as an organization, you have to really challenge whether or not you are achieving the diversity that you possibly could.
Absolutely, Rosanna. I think you're raising such important points, particularly the role of DEI in organizations. Something that I think organizations sometimes miss is having young women represented in those DEI groups, in the people who create the policies and structures, so that they can already input their own experiences within these policies. Sometimes we have DEI groups which can become quite tokenistic and mainstream a formerly patriarchal culture within an organization simply by the members. So also having young women involved in the decision making of what those policies are will create a powerful, not only role model for young women for leadership, but will also bring the lived experiences of women to these tables. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, and Jennifer, I also see you shaking and nodding your head. Do you have anything else to add to Felicity and also Rosanna?
I think I find the tips they're sharing very insightful. I've really enjoyed just listening to the conversation and just seeing where it goes. But I think I have a personal question. I think my question would be, how does a young woman advance in a career, especially in leadership, and still take care of their responsibilities at home? Like, what would your advice be?
So, look, I think the first thing there is it's not a one size fits all approach. Okay. I might overuse that term a little bit, but it's most certainly not. And I think it's up to, women with caring responsibilities, whatever those might be, to really consider what works right for them. Okay. However, what I would say is that I would really like us to have a collective rejection of the superwoman myth, because the reality is juggling work, life, and home caring responsibilities, especially if you're the primary carer, is a big challenge and does not come without its stresses. And I think what I would like to see is organizations having a better recognition for that. And Felicity mentioned earlier about, flexible work models and some of the challenges that can happen around when you introduce flexibility, um, some of the downsides, I guess. And I think if we take, for example, women who have babies and then go back to work, if we take that as an example, we've seen some great strides in terms of greater flexibility, in terms of working practices, but also more leave available. But for me, I think there needs to be a bigger recognition around the other challenges associated with that for women who are returning to work after giving birth and going back to work. Maybe they continue to breastfeed. There are challenges that can be linked for some women to physical trauma and mental trauma that I think maybe we don't have enough conversations about. I also am concerned that in today's society, that organizations and more broadly society, that perhaps we don't put enough value on the role that caring responsibilities, whether that's you're a woman who's just given birth and you're looking after a baby, or a father who's caring for, providing elder care. I don't think we put a value on it like we should. And I think if we raise the bar in terms of the value around caring responsibilities and taking into consideration that women are more likely to be carers, then I think this would have a knock-on impact on how women are viewed when they return to work. And maybe some of that negativity that is associated with, not necessarily is sort of articulated consciously, but that is associated with a return for work for women, could possibly be sort of allayed. Felicity, I'm sure you've got some points to pick up on this, because you sort of touched on some of these earlier when you were chatting.
Sure, absolutely, Rosanna. I think you're raising such great points. Something that organizations also fail to recognize with women is the talent and work that it takes to raise a child. The strategic logistic organizing with a baby and managing a household. These are all skills that women have to learn and have to employ in their homes. And these same skills will show up in the office. So it's also not only about giving more time and flexible hours, but also recognizing the very unique and special multitasking talents that women have. just by virtue of their environment and their responsibilities. Something that organizations could also take advantage of is more flexible hours. I think this COVID environment has taught us that people are as productive at home as they are in the office. So having flexible hours, that opens up a space for young mothers to be able to nurse their children. It also opens up the space for men. I think sometimes organizations can get caught up in thinking women's empowerment is excluding men. But having flexible working hours, having paternity leave, having policies that allow people to engage and meet their family needs creates very motivated staff. We have higher production. Something that the environment also tends to currently push is overwork. The culture of overwork is also part of this patriarchal system that we're working in. And I think reducing those workloads helps people to be more effective in the quality of work rather than this hyper focus on the quantity. So I think we really need to take this moment to reimagine what feminist leadership is and how we can mainstream that into our organizations for a higher output. Because feminist leadership and women leaders create an environment that is safe and that is highly productive for everyone, not just women.
Nabihah, how do you see this?
No, I really agree with both Felicity and Rosanna. I really love the points which have been raised. I think something else that I found really useful was having mental wellness sessions. Sometimes postnatal depression can get real. So having wellness sessions for women when they come back to work is also really critical for us.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to move back to something that Jennifer said in her earlier answer, about having these role models, especially these female role models, We see over and over again that having these female role models really breaks these these rigid gender norms that exist, and also inspire young women to continue to pursue the careers that they aspire to and not that society aspires them to be. So how does Seriano incorporate these role models of young women in their own organization, and what benefits have you seen so far?
All right, that's a great question, Kevin. So here at Seriano, we have women taking up positions at various levels. So we have women taking up team leads. I'm currently the risk consulting team lead, and it's great to see that women are able to come up to me and ask me, how do you balance between life and also your work? So I think I'll share something a little bit personal. Last year I got a baby, so coming back was quite the transition. And I was happy because it was quite a seamless journey coming back to work. The support I was given, the flexible working, so that really helped me. Again, here at Seriano, we do a lot of mentorship. So the women leaders usually have mentorship sessions with the other women working within Seriano. So that's really able to help them just in terms of shaping their career, what certifications they want to achieve, where they see themselves in 5 years. So I think these are some of the programs we've been trying to implement.
Okay, that's really interesting to hear. And women are not a homogeneous group. And Rosanna, I really love that you mentioned that, because I think we can all see that it's true. Of course it's true. And women should not and cannot be seen as a homogeneous group, and their aspirations always differ. So how do you think organizations can acknowledge these differences, Rosanna?
So I think that the first step is just that, acknowledging that. And, today we're talking about young women and leadership, and it's about acknowledging that women are not one dimensional. And depending on, as we talked earlier about your characteristics, your experience, your background, all these things will have an impact on how you turn up in the workplace. And, we all need to turn up in the workplace and feel happy, feel recognized, and feel that we belong. And if we only see our colleagues through a one-dimensional lens, then that's not going to happen. So it's really important that we understand this, and we understand that when we talk about women, that all women have had a different journey to get where they are, and it's really important that we take into consideration the factors that are at play at that. And like I said, various things like socioeconomic background. So I think in terms of, again, coming back to a bit of a catch-all, it's really about organizations saying, right, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. I think it's so easy when we just talk about women for organizations to sort of to go into that position. And I think if we really want to make progress and we really want to harness diversity to drive innovation and improve the bottom line, which is what we so often talk about, then there's got to be this acknowledgement in terms of recognizing that, women are more than just women. And, just to add to that, in terms of, I guess, a practical takeaway, I mentioned data earlier on. It's really important that when we talk about data, then we capture data as organizations and that we use that data to help drive change. And it's really important that we cut that data to show us the differences that people are experiencing, because people will experience different challenges and barriers in the workplace because of their different characteristics. And I think it's really important for organizations to firstly acknowledge it, but then also unpack some of that data so they can understand where they are and vision where they could be.
Absolutely, Rosanna. I think bringing diversity and the evidence that data provides us is really an opportunity to celebrate our differences. You see such great energy brought in through our recognition of different types of women: trans women, women from the global south, women of color, women living with disabilities, women with different languages. All these people are bringing in a diversity of experience, wealth of knowledge, and I think it helps to create an environment that is more productive in terms of finding creative solutions to challenges. Often, the way we have a patriarchal top-down system that very much favors a Western approach to organizational work leaves out all the learnings and opportunities we can have from a diverse team. So I think this is really such a key moment to celebrate those differences and bring them into the corporate space.
Exactly. We have to celebrate those differences. I love that you said that because, I want to go back to what Rosanna said. No, women are not a homogeneous group. And, I think we have to escape that concept that we see women as one big group, which is, of course, not the case. So let's start by liberating the world from that. But Nabihah, I wanna move on to you now. We've heard about reflections and tips from Rosanna and Felicity about this. But do you have more suggestions for companies, especially companies in Kenya, about the ways to empower young women to, push for these leadership positions?
I think it starts from all the way down to high school, having mentorship sessions, having women coming to speak to these young girls. I went to an all girls high school, and having these sessions was really eye opening and inspiring, and it actually drove me into pursuing a career in technology. So I think starting from there would be a great point. Also, active hiring of women within certain positions, especially in the STEM field, that would really help. Another thing is trying to have some roles reserved for women, having the 50-50 balance. Sometimes it's not always as easy, but I think that would go a long way in terms of improving this.
Yeah, and Rosanna, I also see you nodding your head again.
And look, I guess some of this sort of plays back to what I'd mentioned at the beginning around sort of the role of education and I guess this having role models from an early age. Early years is so important for girls and women as they progress through education and through their careers. So I think, a lot of our discussion today is around, what can organizations do? But I really think as a society, we also need to be thinking about, what can we do right at the beginning of, a young girl's journey through life in those early years? How can we create those role models and how can we send those positive messages that everything is achievable and not to be limited by being a girl or a woman?
Exactly. I love that. And Jennifer, what do you see this? How do you see this?
I think the one thing I'd like to add is apart from doing all that, I think the way companies manage male employees and female employees, if that would be changed so that they can cater to the different needs for the employees. For example, my supervisor very much understands because she has young children and she is a married woman, so she understands what it takes to manage a house and a family. So she has been very intentional about how she manages me vis-a-vis how she manages my other male counterparts, which allows me grace and also allows me to be able to do my job. And yeah, I think that's something companies should be able or should start thinking about, how to manage their male and female employees differently.
Yeah, exactly. And I think every single question we answer, brings a whole different field of another topic that we can spend 5 hours discussing. But I just want to quickly go back to the education aspect because I think, I'm a young person myself and I just finished high school, a few years ago. And, it always bars me to this day that, my female classmates who most of the time had better grades than me, did more schoolwork than me. And when talking to our study coordinator about future steps, why did I always get a more positive answer than them? And that always bothered me because we have to start by emancipating ourselves. Because most of the time, when you look at these study advisors, they're also women. So we have to start by each woman emancipating themselves because the more the older generation keeps pushing this misogyny to our younger generation, we will never escape. So I really want to focus on, it's also everyone's responsibility to start emancipating ourselves because, you know, most of the time people think you can't do something alone, but it starts at yourself. It starts at one person. If everyone does that, we can go a really long way. But do you have anything to say, Felicity?
Yeah, no, I agree with you in terms of education and emancipating ourselves. I think that's where the most difficult work is. I think there are steps that we're taking. There are organizations who are working on this, but the biggest battle is for us to unlearn all the isms that we've taken on. So really personalizing that journey, applying it to our home environments, will help us when we're in that position to make a decision, whether you're in an HR panel, whether you're in a DEI panel, whether you're a teacher, it doesn't matter where you are, but in your sphere of influence, to just take a moment to think, how can I help this individual? What structural barriers can I make sure that I am overcoming or protecting this individual from? If each of us take on that role as people, I think overall it'll come over time.
Yeah, and I really like that you said, to unlearn all those isms.
Unlearn.
But I think I want to go just a bit more tangible on that. Rosanna, do you have any recommendations or tips about how, our communities can start with towards the path of unlearning all these isms? How do you see this?
So, look, I guess what a point I would like to make first of all is around women in leadership. And it's something sort of Felicity alluded to there as well, I think. But I would like to say that, sometimes we have examples when women have been able to smash what they used to call the glass ceiling. And then when other women are coming up through the ranks, possibly maybe they're not extending that helping hand to other women coming up, and because of their experiences they feel, well, look, I've had to learn the hard way, you need to do that too. And I think it's really important that we do try to support one another, and that's men and women, that we do that, and that we appreciate that everybody's journey towards trying to get to the top has been different with different challenges. So I think it's really important, just stressing what Felicity has said there, is that we do have this sort of collegiate kind of attitude, because you know in organizations it's not about one individual or a group of individuals. If you have success, then everybody wins. So I think it's really important that we take that on, and as senior women that we take on that responsibility of reaching out and supporting and helping other young women coming through. I think in terms of the point Felicity raised there about unlearning the isms, I think it's great. I'm going to use that one myself. I think for me, and in my own personal experiences, I think it really is about challenging. So, Kevin, you mentioned about your example, and I know not everybody has it within their gift to challenge, to be vocal. But I think it does start with challenging in schools, challenging, the individuals who are making these decisions and doing this protective channeling and saying, hey, how come you're having that conversation with me, but with her, you're having a different conversation? Have you thought about that? And I do think as time goes on, I think what you only have to see the role that children and young people are playing in all different kinds of activism, that we are empowering people to have that challenge and push back in those conversations. And I think it's also important for parents to challenge, because I know certainly from my experience of growing up in a city area, in a school that possibly wasn't considered the best school at the time, teachers just took everything that, parents took everything that the teachers said about their children as completely 100% the truth. So if a teacher said to a parent, oh, well, we only think that your child is going to be able to achieve so much, because of the distribution of power, the parent maybe from this lower socioeconomic background group or area like I come from might think, well, that teacher must know best and they're doing their job. And I think we've got to challenge this, and we've got to stick up for these younger people and say, sometimes teachers and policymakers and careers advisors are not always right. And sometimes it's okay to say, can you just explain that? Can you unpack that a bit for me and explain to me why you think that? Because I feel that you're narrowing my world and my horizons. Could you explain that to me? And I think challenging is key. And I think we all have in our own way. And like I said, not everybody is able to be that vocal. I was that vocal as a child, but not everybody would be that vocal. But I think we have to try and find ways to challenge, either directly or indirectly, because I think in challenging the isms, then, we're going to see progress. But while we maintain this, these attitudes and these views, and they are being propagated amongst young people, then, it makes our jobs then trying to create equity in organizations that bit tougher.
Yes, no, challenging the status quo and unlearning the isms. I think those are two of the key takeaways that I can take from this episode, along with all the things we've learned today. But thank you so much for sharing all your incredible insights and tips today. I think one thing that our conversation clearly showed is that having female leaders is absolutely crucial to ensuring companies are resilient and well-performing. I hope today's episode and today's discussion will inspire more organizations to explore ways to achieving a balanced gender representation in the leadership positions, and also to bring young women to the front. Thank you for tuning in to the Future Economies Start with Youth podcast by CFYE. My name is Kevin Estacia, and see you next time.